Blog Talk Radio.
And welcome back to the Wayne Bradley Show. Thank you. Welcome to the Wayne Bradley Show. Thank you for everyone that's listening in today. I've got a return guest, someone that's been one of our most popular guests on the show, someone that's been catching a lot of attention recently because of his an open carry dinner. Hold on. Hi. We're still here having a little technical difficulty there. Sorry about that. People, I want to, again, introduce my guest, Rick Ector, gun rights activist here in the Detroit, Michigan area. Again, he had an open carry dinner on Monday that caught national attention. Rick, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Wayne, thank you for having me on the show, man. It's a pleasure to finally make it back. I know you and I had some discussions not too long ago. Well, it doesn't seem that long ago, where said, hey, man, you were well received, got a lot of hits off the last time I was on the show. And I really didn't want to come on the show unless I really had something that I was really excited to share both with you and with your listenership.
I'm having some audio feedback here. Can you hear that in your ears too, Rick?
Can I hear exactly what? I hear you.
Okay, hold on real quick. Let me adjust this here. All right, Rick. Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
Okay, I'm hoping to get this feedback out the ear. Basically, we're talking a little bit. How did that event? I was talking about the open carry event that you had on Monday. What made you want to throw that event?
I'm a firearms instructor, and one of the things that I teach is personal protection, which is essentially carrying a concealed firearm. And one of the things that I felt was really important, at least for me, I kind of go against the grain with a lot of firearms instructors, at least here, locally, regionally, is that I feel that it's important to also let people that come through my class know that there's a concept known as open carry. This is where you're actually going to carry and display a firearm where it's completely visible, such that if a person casually looked at you, there is no question whatsoever that you are armed. And this is a topic really that is not covered in any particular place. You would think, well, we hear about this concealed pistol license deal because everyone wants to get a permit to carry concealed, but there's really a dearth of information, a lack of information with regards to open carry. And I have a few reasons why. I have one principal reason why I believe, at least here in the city of Detroit and the surrounding suburbs, why it is such a mystery.
What's your theory on that?
Well, that passage in the Bible, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. This is one of those things that's legal, has been legal ever since the state of Michigan was admitted into the Union. And if I haven't forgot my civics lesson, that was back in 1837. Essentially, a lot of people might even refer to it as some new law, like all of a sudden some legislatures got together and said, hey, let's draft and debate and enact a law where not only can you carry concealed, but, hey, let's create a law where you can carry openly and be able to have that right. But that right has always existed. And if I can give a history lesson, and this history lesson is going to take us to the city of Detroit, but in a different time, a different era, in the 1920s. In 1925, the city of Detroit was, I guess as you can imagine, markedly different from where it is today. The city of Detroit is principally a city inhabited by African Americans. Back in 1925, that wasn't the case. It was predominantly populated by white people. And the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan, had a huge population here. They were very influential, and they basically permeated every fabric, every facet of our society here in Detroit. You know, if we're talking about the law enforcement, judges, lawyers, you name it, the Klan was somewhere around or involved, or they had someone there. And in 1925, there was this very prominent black physician. His name was Dr. Ossian Sweet. He was a guy who went to school and achieved some level of accomplishment in the field of medicine. And, you know, and I don't think it's anything that's strange to us today. If you put your work in, you put your time in, you educate yourself, and you think you want to provide a better life for your family and for your children, you're making more money, you want to move them into a nice house, a nice neighborhood. It just so happened that the neighborhood he wanted to move into was a mixed neighborhood, but however, it was a neighborhood that was monitored by what the Klan used to call themselves in this one particular neighborhood. They used to call themselves the Neighborhood Improvement Association. You know, this is one of those code words where these individuals were really Klan, and they were keeping certain individuals out of these neighborhoods. And they essentially told them very plainly, if you move into this neighborhood, there's going to be a lot of trouble. But you know what? He said, hey, I'm not going to be deterred. I'm not going to be bullied. I'm not going to let you guys intimidate me. He moved his family in, but guess what he brought with him? He brought his long guns with him. That very night, across the street from his home, a mob of a documented 500 people gathered in the field directly across the street from his home. There were chants and demonstrations, a lot of yelling, basically creating a hostile attitude. The police were there. However, they weren't there to disperse the crowd. They were there just to watch and monitor and see what happens. Somewhere along the line, shots were fired from the mob and into the home of the Sweet Home. Individuals in the Sweet Home returned fire. That returned fire from inside the home, 3 people were killed from the mob. That's when the police decided that they were going to storm the house and finally something was going to be done. So we had people from the Sweet Home, including Dr. Sweet, who were arrested and put on trial. A lot of people have a lot of ideas of what they think the trial of the century or the trial of the millennium is or was with respect to the city of Detroit. A lot of recent headlines, you know, from recent years, people think that certain individuals who had some legal troubles, that was like the trial of the century. By no stretch of imagination was that the case. The trial of the century was Dr. Ossian Sweet. He was represented by none other than famed attorney Clarence Darrow. That trial was presided by the great, late Frank Murphy, whose name sits on the courthouse downtown. This was a man who went on to do great things in the legal field, including being United States Supreme Court Justice. At the end of the day, after the trial he was acquitted of all charges by reason of self-defense by an all-white jury, which was unheard
we're having some
of.
technical difficulties here. Rick, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. And he was acquitted of all charges by this all-white jury, which was unprecedented during that era. It was unfathomable that something of that nature could occur. So what happened quickly after that, just 2 years later, the Michigan State Legislature, at the behest of the Klan, created the most draconian set of firearms law that had ever been enacted in the Midwest. This was the so-called Michigan Firearms Act of 1927. The sole purpose of this legislation was to deny access to black people for arms. They created the 83 county gun boards. The sole purpose of these county gun boards were to restrict handgun licensing to black people. If you weren't black and you lived in a county where a lot of black people didn't live, they would pass them out like Halloween candy. It also created handgun licensing permits. The sole purpose of our firearms laws in the state of Michigan have racist roots. And it's from these racist roots that these gun control laws that were created and that whole mindset about black people and guns has really been carried forth in generation after generation here in the Metro Detroit area. And it wasn't until we got Public Act 381 of 2000 when the licensing of concealed pistol licenses became a uniform process by which everyone had to follow the same criteria to get licensed. That really we address the issues with race and guns, but it's still complicated because we basically have institutionalized the racism that permeates with our gun laws.
Okay.
So when you talk about people in the city of Detroit today, my estimate is 75 people came together, armed with firearms, in an establishment within the city limits of Detroit. It is completely understandable how this became big news. The Associated Press got a hold of it. They sent the story through the newswire, and it got picked up by every agency that subscribes to that service.
Okay.
And it became a big deal. I mean, all the local media outlets got a hold of the story, and it got a lot of coverage. And some of that coverage, really there was a moment when we had a little setback because of so much coverage from the initial venue.
Right. They actually changed the restaurant, the location, right?
Changed the restaurant, changed the venue, and we ended up going with another location. And by virtue of going to this other location, we found a better location, not only in terms of amenities and facilities, but a place that welcomed us with open arms. And you know what? That's where we'd rather be, where we're welcome as opposed to some place that didn't, embrace us when everyone was watching.
Right.
But, the main thing that I want to focus on is crime, self-protection, enforcing our rights.
Right.
Because
I'm sorry. I guess that's what I was going to ask you about. How long have you been teaching these classes and and putting the emphasis on education about gun rights?
I've been teaching. I'm into my 5th year. I just began my 5th year of teaching, and I got into it. Quite honestly, I was a victim of a violent crime. I was robbed at gunpoint in my own driveway in North Rosedale Park, where I resided at the time. And I really didn't like it, to put it plainly. And I was really kicking myself when I really think back upon it, that I had allowed so many years to pass since the law had changed, in which there were uniform standards to get a concealed pistol license. It became one of those things where, you know what, I'll do it later. And, man, I had put it off like 5-6 years after the law had changed. And you know what? It's like winning the lottery. My time was up. I was unarmed, and these thugs were, and they robbed me, And grace of God, I'm still here.
Right.
I chose to exercise more involvement in my personal safety as a result of my research. I found out that there is no duty, no protected duty that the police have with regards to citizens to providing them with service such that they're guaranteed not to be crime victims.
Right.
This has been tried in the courts, and the courts have always ruled, no, that responsibility rests with the individual.
Right.
So I took that to heart and took all the training I could get, and I got to a point where I felt I was plateauing, and I felt I want to give back to the community and not only empower myself, I wanted to empower other people who were curious about this thing of personal protection and self-defense. And as a natural outgrowth of that, I'm teaching people how to be certified to be concealed pistol licensee holders. I also want to make sure that they're fully empowered with their full rights of knowing that they can openly carry a firearm. So having this dinner, man, which the real focus was education. Educating people of a right that they have and they didn't know, and I believe, in my opinion, a lot of people still don't want them to know.
Right. Are you sympathetic to any of those people that are out there that are not what we consider gun lovers, that are maybe intimidated by seeing people with open, in an open carry situation?
Sympathetic. Let me answer that this way. What I'm all about is that we all have these God-given, constitutionally recognized inalienable rights. We have First Amendment, freedom of speech, Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear firearms, and then we got the right to peaceably assemble, and it goes on and on and on, right? Unreasonable searches and seizure, right against self-incrimination. And here's the thing about these rights, man, particularly when we talk about the First Amendment or the Second Amendment. The fact that I'm exercising my right, that is something that I personally decided was right for me.
Okay.
And as having that right, I feel it is my duty, it's my job to determine if I want to exercise that right, if that right is the right one for me.
Okay.
Now, in exercising my right to carry a firearm, whether it's open or concealed, I also respect the anti-gun people. I respect their right not to carry a firearm because it's not right for them. I'm not going to beat them over the head and say, hey, you must bear a firearm. You must embrace your full rights. No. All I'm asking is if you will respect my right to make my decision for me, I will respect your right to not exercise that right. And here, I'll even go one better. Not only will I recognize your right to not bear a firearm or carry a firearm, I will still fight every day that I do this thing, this firearms instruction thing, this gun rights thing. I will do everything to protect that right that you are not exercising, such that if you ever change your mind, it is there. And if it's not there for you, I'm working every day to make sure it's there for another generation to make that decision as to whether firearms ownership or the right to carry a gun, either open or concealed, is right for those generations that come after us.
Exactly. Now, with that dinner, did it come any negative attention? Did you have any any negatives that came from doing the open carry dinner?
I mean, anytime you do something, it can be considered, an issue in which you're going to have people that are for it and you're going to have people that are against it. I've talked with the proprietor of the restaurant. He got some calls where people, said some things where, such as the fact that, well, we don't know if we're going to come back. And then, he got some calls from people in the gun community like, hey, man, one, we didn't know your restaurant existed. Two, now that we've been here, it's awesome. Three, we're going to be back. And now we know that you are at least gun tolerant, if not pro-gun. So If we ever have something and we want a nice place to have it, we know that this is a place that we can patronize. Because here's one of the things I came against when I was doing my location scouting for this event.
Okay.
Because of the sensitivity with firearms, I wanted to make absolutely certain that there was no way possible that someone could be served alcohol. This whole, gun law thing, what's a bar, what's the restaurant, and it's all based on what percentage of your revenues is by food and what percentage is based by liquor, sold by the glass to be consumed on the premises, and that type of thing. Or if you're a person who's open carrying and you don't have a concealed pistol license at all, then you're not even supposed to be in there unless you got express permission from the person that's running it. So I had to get a waiver from him to grant everybody access. And then I wanted a place that didn't have, that wasn't going to serve alcohol. Man, there is a dearth of places in the city where you can have a nice family atmosphere when you subtract out the fast food joints and the Coney Island places, where you can have a nice meal without alcohol.
Okay.
What place comes to the top of your mind?
That's all I'm thinking right now. Like, man, and you can actually sit down and eat. You got me stumped right now. You took out Coney Island.
I said you got to subtract out the Coney Island, and you got to subtract out McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's and Church's Chicken. Subtract all that stuff. I found a nice. You know what? It doesn't have to be a 5-star classic. Maybe 3.5 stars.
Yep, you stumped me as soon as you took out Coney Island. That's as good as I know. And sit down, and besides downtown, obviously, all the things that are downtown. But they serve alcohol though.
Yeah, so my publicist, bless her, Kimberly Miss Pink Toes, came. She knew the East Side pretty well, and she suggested we go scout some locations over there. And she said, "Look, we're going to find a spot to host this event today." And you know what? Her confidence was infectious, man. I got fired up. Yeah, we're going to find one today. And you know what? We found the Blue Point. They welcomed us, and we made it happen. And man, the event, I'm hearing adjectives from people that were there. So they describe it in such glowing terms, such as epic.
Well, let's give them a little shine on the radio show. What's the name of the restaurant again, and where are they located?
It's Blue Point Restaurant. The address is 17131 East Warren Avenue, just east of Cashew on the far east side.
All right. Thank you again.
Friendly staff, great service, hands-on management. The food was awesome. The event, like I said, they described it as epic. We had a live band playing, man. It was a classy event, and it was well covered. And you look at some of the images that came out of those videos from the the TV stations, Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 7. We even had the radio stations come out. It was truly historic, for one. The first ever sit-down dinner, open carry dinner in the city of Detroit.
That is crazy.
And you know why it was newsworthy, why it was a hot story, and the coverage that this story garnered was truly reflected by the coverage we got. So I rated a qualified success by any measure.
That's good. Now, after that dinner, what was the feedback from, have you had a lot of feedback from people calling in or giving you, calling your school, letting you know what they thought of the event?
Well, one of the main reason, I'm going to say the main reason for doing the event was education, awareness. And I couldn't have done that much better than what we had. I couldn't have predicted the amount of attention that it had, but I've experienced some positive feedback in terms of positive results. I've gotten a lot of people calling me about this personal protection thing, this exercising more involvement in your personal protection, whether it's carrying a concealed pistol license or whether we're talking about carrying openly. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that I really was a little surprised about was that people had other obligations, but they really heard about this thing such that they, for whatever reason, and I'll talk about a couple of those reasons, they just wanted to come in and witness it, find me, meet me, thank me for doing this event, and encourage me to do more in the future, to do more educational events, whether we're talking about a sit-down dinner or whether we're going to do some seminars in terms of like a classroom setting where we're actually teaching folks the ins and outs and the nuances and the laws about open carry and compare and contrast that with concealed carry, which, really, in my opinion, is needed.
Right. Do you think that's one of the things that makes you stand out with your the way you're instructing and giving people that kind of information from the other firearms instructors here locally?
Well, that is definitely something that differentiates me from a lot of other instructors in the area. Some instructors, particularly those that are taught by law enforcement, law enforcement community isn't a huge fan of law-abiding citizens exercising their right to, openly display a firearm. They're basically anti-open carry, and for certain, they're not going to teach it. We teach it.
That's what I was concerned about.
I'm sorry, what was the question, Wayne?
I said I'm sorry. That's what I was wondering about. Do you think they're purposely not trying to inform the citizens of their open carry rights?
I think there's a lot of things at play here, whether they're doing it intentionally or not. But here's the thing: they're not gonna tell you that you can.
Okay.
So if you're in ignorance and they know you're in ignorance, well, they hope that you stay in ignorance, because if you become educated and empowered, you might have these crazy ideas such as actually exercising those rights. The exercising of those rights they don't want you to do. So no, they're not going to tell you. Is it fair to say or accurate to say that, they're doing it intentionally? Well, you know what? If you don't know about it and you don't ask, well, they don't have to tell you, right?
Exactly. Now, and not only are you I consider you more of an activist also at this point, because you're really getting involved in the community and showing people, informing them of their rights. Do you like that? Do you look at it in that sense as also being an activist, as besides just an educator? Well,
you have to be. The whole thing about educating, and we're really talking about empowerment, man, and it really involves a certain amount of activism, because not only are you educating, there's a very real fight that's being waged every day, man, between the folks that are trying to preserve the last vestiges of freedom that we have, including this whole right to keep and carry a firearm. Every time I teach a class, if you're a firearms instructor and you're teaching a class, I look at that as a form of activism too.
Okay.
Because if you're just teaching folks about the safe operation, the safe handling, the responsible use of a firearm, that in itself is really a form of activism. Because here's the thing. You're bringing in some cases, a new generation of firearms owners. These are individuals who, once they get these firearms and they behave lawfully and responsibly, they're going to start looking at some other things. They're going to start becoming more sensitive to who are they voting for.
Okay.
Who you vote for might become more important. A lot of people, they vote for candidates for a lot of different things. Whether it's their position on fiscal responsibility or their stance on crime or whether it's immigration, you got to also throw into the mix where they stand on firearms ownership, this right to keep and bear arms. What exactly is a reasonable limit? The Second Amendment is a big wedge issue when it comes to politics.
Right.
So, just teaching in itself is activism, too. And then, I take it a step further in that I'm going to educate you not only on the law, I'm going to educate you to protect your rights should you be forced to defend yourself. You take some classes, particularly with law enforcement teaching it, they teach you to do things that they themselves don't do. If law enforcement is involved in a shooting, they are not going to make a statement right at the scene, right after it happened, and send out a press release to the media documenting what happened. They're not going to do it. They're going to get their people together, and they're going to have a huddle, whether it's the immediate supervisor, the union rep, and they're going to figure out what they want to do. When I'm teaching, I tell my folks, hey, protect your rights. You have the right to remain silent. Use that right. Here's the funny thing. The thing is that when you're undergoing stress, you're not even capable really of documenting what actually happened due to the physiological effects that you're undergoing. So it's really not in your best interest to do all that.
Right.
Further instances of activism would include this open carry thing, having dinners, desensitizing folks that law-abiding citizens can behave lawfully and morally with the firearm. When we had this idea that we wanted to have this open carry dinner, you had a few anti-gun people say, you know what, that's bad news. You're going to put 75 gun owners together for a dinner. You know what, we don't think that's a good idea. This event proved those individuals wrong. We had a great time. As we expected, there were no issues, and we made a statement by saying the fact that we can come together and have a meal and enjoy each other's company and just have a great time.
Do you have any future events on the horizon?
I'm in the planning stages right now of putting together some educational events with regards to open carry. This will be like a 2-hour seminar that'll be held within the city limits of Detroit. These events are happening, sponsored by other organizations out in the suburbs, but no one is doing them in the city of Detroit. So if no one's doing it, then you know what? I'm going to take it upon myself to step up and make it happen. Because no one else has stepped up and doing it, I'm just going to assume the position and just make it happen.
Okay.
It's needed, and somebody's got to do it. Why not me?
Makes sense to me. Why do you think? Why do you think that we have now in Detroit? You have a congressman like John Conyers who's fiercely what I would consider anti-gun. How do you think he can make that decision in the city with the crime is in the direction it's in? And he also has armed security, which I always find interesting.
Yeah, I really can't answer that. I mean, I don't know how you do that. All I know is that it's really hypocritical for certain people who come out and say that they're anti-gun and then they got people protecting them who are armed. I really don't get that. Okay. I don't get it. It implies that they're somehow more important than we are, and that smacks of elitism, and I don't understand it, and I can't really say why he does what he does. I really don't understand it.
I mean, even just from a standpoint of the crime, that is, you have a pretty high crime rate, a lot of unsolved murders. How would someone properly say that you wouldn't want someone to be able to protect themselves and with gun rights?
Well, here's the thing that a lot of people don't really, the anti-gun people, and I say it over and over again, just can't wrap their minds around. Here's the thing. The thing is that criminals and the mentally ill do not obey laws. They don't.
Right.
A lot of people really believe that they can solve the crime problem by enacting more laws. There are already 20,000 gun laws on the books. We really don't need any more. We really don't need any more. And if we put them on the books, it's not going to make a dent. And all it's going to do is put more restrictions on the law-abiding.
Right. That's to me that says the only people you want with with guns are the criminals and police officers. You know, you make it that much harder. Chicago.
You know, and the thing that they don't get, well, you know what, it's already illegal for criminals and the mentally ill to have firearms, but you know what? They're going to get them anyway. And if they're going to get them and law-abiding citizens can't have them, that's a recipe for crime. We've seen that in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, they were ready to call in the National Guard.
They're ready to call in the Guard because of all of these shootings, but you know what? It's illegal to have a gun in Chicago, even if you're a law-abiding citizen.
And I think that's kind of like the direction they want people to go in, you know. And
so, you know, it's like okay, guns are already outlawed, but people are still getting shot. You would think that they would realize that outlawing guns was not the answer. Really, what you should do is level the playing field. You should make it more easily accessible for law-abiding citizens to have guns and at least have a deterrent effect, such that if individuals see if a person is open carrying or there is at least a high probability that a person might be armed, maybe people who are doing these types of things, you know, carjackings, robberies, they might choose a different vocation.
Okay. Makes sense. What do you think about this? I'm seeing kind of some of the things that's going on here in the Detroit area. What do you think about tomorrow with this the Islamic Center protests with this pastor that wants to actually burn a Quran over there in Dearborn?
Well, you know, as it is with our rights, right? I mean, you know, if you could, I didn't follow it very closely, but you know, we got that First Amendment, right? You know, through freedom of expression.
Right.
And, you know, you got to balance, you know, your freedoms with being offensive, right?
Right.
If you burn someone's religious material, some people might, you know, be, you know, upset with that.
I would think so.
he might be a little over the top. You know what I mean? You know, he might be a little over the top, burning the Quran. I mean, we all have to get together in this country. We all got to live together, and we got to really be tolerant. And you know, just like we believe this whole gun thing, well, we got to respect the views of the non-gun people. At least, like I couched it before, if you're not pro-gun, well, at least be tolerant of me and not try to take away my right, you know, to own a gun. And I'm going to respect your right to be anti-gun. Just don't try to infringe upon my right. You have the right to do it, not do it, and so do I. And
that's usually the difference.
I think there's a middle ground. I think we can get along if we want to.
That's usually, though, that's the common trend I see with a lot of anti-gun people. That not only do they not want a gun, they don't want anyone else to have them. That seems to be the current trend, what I notice with a lot of anti-gun people.
Yeah, you know, and that's one of the other fallacies, you know, that if guns were totally outlawed, that's a concept for you. See, if guns were outlawed, let's say if only the police had guns. Let's say not even criminals had guns. Let's just hypothetically assume that just the police or just the government had guns. By definition, we would have what is known as a police state. And we know that in a police state, there's no concept of freedom in a police state. So I don't think that that's what we want either, right?
No.
So, I mean, and then if we restrict the rights of guns from the law-abiding, then the criminals, they have a field day because they're going to have them anyway. Just like how drugs come into this country. They're illegal. Cocaine, heroin. We don't make that stuff here. But they manage to find their way into this country anyway, and so would guns. And then only the criminals would have these illegal guns that are imported into this country if we outlawed them. So to say that we banned them or outlawed them, we wouldn't have them, that's a little short-sighted.
I hear that, Rick. Do you make it? Another question I want to ask you about is with the school. How often are you teaching classes?
I teach classes roughly every other weekend. I taught a class this past Saturday. If I was to continue on with that schedule, I would be teaching a class next weekend. But next weekend, of course, is the NRA's annual meeting in Pittsburgh.
Ooh, sounds fun.
I tentatively have plans to go, and I think I'm still on track to go. Got a few personal, issues. Had some family come in from out of town that I'm hosting and keeping my eye on. So,
I know how that can change plans.
Wasn't supposed to come in during this time, but they're here during this time. And on a very personal note, I met my granddaughter this week. So
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. She's 4 months old, and she's actually in my avatar on Facebook.
All right. How do you feel about people teaching their young relatives about the importance and respecting guns?
In a lot of places, in a lot of states, including Michigan, firearms ownership, learning about guns is a family tradition. It's something that typically in a lot of communities, in a lot of areas, is handed down from generation to generation. People literally grow up with guns in the house.
Okay.
A lot of people who are not familiar with firearms are usually surprised to find that in the state of Michigan, the age to get a hunting license is 12 years old. So you can actually go hunting with an experienced licensed hunter, but at 12 years old, you can be licensed to go hunting in the state of Michigan. So, this whole concept of children and guns should not mix. That's a viewpoint that's based, not on having a lot of information about the topic. There are a lot of youth sporting activities that happen, especially when we talk about some of the upper-level scouting activities that exist. There's youth sporting events and competitions. To say that children and guns should not intersect, that's not totally accurate. But if we're talking about very small children who actually don't know what a gun is or what a firearm is, yeah, I'll agree with you, every day of the week that those kids should be kept away from guns. But if you have children who are emotionally mature enough to handle, learning about firearms, and you actually take them and you work with them and you train them and you teach them about them and you tell them what they are and you remove the mystery from it and you get them exposed to actually what it's all about, the earlier the better. You remove the mystery from it, and you don't have the situation where you're trying to hide them from the kids, and then you run the risk of kids coming across it and not knowing what to do and not what it's for. That could be, something that you don't want to have happen.
Okay. Hey, Rick, it looks like we got a call here on the board. I've been posting on Twitter and Facebook. If you had any questions, any CCW questions, any open carry questions, to give us a call. So, you want to take this first call?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Hey, caller, you're on the air on the Wayne Bradley Show.
Wayne, how you doing? Wayne, this is Terry. Rick, how you doing?
Man, I'm great. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I do have a question for you.
Sure.
As it relates to open carry, I want to know if a person doesn't have their CPL just yet, and they want to drive around in the car with not in the car as far as the the firearm is, but in the trunk, unload it like they can legally transport it. Can they do that to transport an open carry to wherever they're going to go?
Well, if you look at the statute, you can transport a firearm if you transport it properly for any lawful purpose. If you look at the statute, they list a couple of lawful activities, but that list of lawful activities is not all-inclusive. There are some things where they say, okay, if you're moving from one house to another, or if you're transporting a gun from your home to a gun range, those are some suggested things that are lawful. But any lawful purpose for which you want to transport a firearm from one location to another location, as long as you do it properly, you have the firearm unloaded, separated from ammunition, in a case, in a trunk. You may even want to go to the ridiculous absurdity of having the ammunition in the glove box and having the actual secured, unloaded firearm in the rearmost part of your vehicle or in your trunk, and you should be good.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for calling in.
Okay, great.
And that's that was you talked about it earlier, and I think that was the one question I was going to definitely ask you about was the kind of the confusion of the places that we can't bring the guns into, like a restaurant that serves liquor, but it's not a bar. Can you kind of give us a little more insight onto that law and how that they decide which place? So people don't walk into certain bars and they're not supposed to be there with their CCW.
If I really wanted to make it complicated, I could really, really throw a wrinkle in there. Let me take a quick stab at it.
Okay.
Pistol-free zones. Pistol-free zones are places such as a church or a place of worship. And if we're talking about other things, would be like an entertainment venue that seats 2,500, or you should know seats 2,500. A hospital, university, dormitory, and classrooms. You're talking about a bar, which the law states very strangely, a place that serves a place that generates more than half of its revenue from the sale of alcohol by the glass to be consumed on the premises. That's their definition of a bar. And you got casinos, you got any K through 12, school, daycare centers. Let's see, what am I missing? Am I missing something? Sports arenas. Those are your so-called pistol-free zones. Now, one of the interesting things about the law is this. If you have a concealed pistol license, you can actually open carry in a pistol-free zone if, you're not violating any personal property rights. So said if the owner of that pistol-free zone, if it's private property, said, hey, I don't want you here with a gun. But, we are exempted in the law because we have concealed pistol licenses from pistol-free zones. Okay. But that's only if you have a concealed pistol license and you are open carrying. However, if you're talking about open carrying, because you don't have a concealed pistol license, stay out of those pistol-free zones.
Now, I guess that's something else that people needed to understand. So you can actually have an open carry without having a CCW license. So those are two totally different.
Oh yeah, well make sure I definitely touch upon that too. In the state of Michigan, to open carry a handgun, what you need to do, you need to be at least 18 years of age. You need to have a firearm that is registered in your name. Of course, when you're talking about registering a handgun, a firearm in your name, well, we're talking about registering a handgun. They do a background check on you when they register that handgun in your name. So you're 18, you have this registered handgun that is registered to you, not someone else, but it's registered to you. You are on foot. You can't have a loaded handgun in a vehicle or motorized device without a concealed pistol license. So here's the thing. You're 18, you got this registered handgun on your person, you're on foot, and you're not in a pistol-free zone.
Okay.
This is for people who do not have a concealed pistol license. And, of course, to get a concealed pistol license, you have to be 21 years of age, Michigan resident, or for the last 6 months, a U.S. citizen or a resident alien. You have to be able to pass a criminal background check. You can't have any history of mental illness. And take a basic pistol safety training class such as the one that I offer. Just so you know, in both cases, whether we're talking open or concealed, anyone with a felony cannot possess a firearm. Also, to anyone with a documented, proven, I guess one way of saying it, by qualified medical personnel that's having a mental illness cannot possess a firearm either.
Is there ever any way that someone who had a criminal record, a felony that got expunged, will they be allowed to have a CCW license?
Well, that process exists for some individuals. For an individual who, let's see, if an individual has only one conviction, just one conviction and one conviction only, so we're talking about just that one felony, which is really kind of rare these days, because what usually happens when you catch a felony, there are usually some cases in which they slap on another 2 felonies. Like if you commit a felony and you happen to have a firearm, you're going to automatically catch that felony firearm charge. So once they give you your felony for the offense that you did, and if you got a gun, well, then they give you the felony firearm charge so that you'll have 2 convictions and that there is no way that you'll ever be able to get an expungement. So that's kind of how they do things, in the legal system. But if you just so happen to have just one felony, and it was for an offense for which you could not have received a life sentence, or an offense which is reportable to the Secretary of State, and it has been at least 5 years in which this, you got convicted of this offense, and you satisfied all of your requirements, whether it's probation, parole, all of that, restitution. You've made complete amends for the conviction you've had. So you make complete amends. It's been 5 years for an offense that is your only conviction. It's an offense for which you could not have received a life sentence, and it was for an offense that was not reportable to the Secretary of State. Then you may be eligible to petition the court to set aside your conviction, and for all purposes, you can legally say that you do not have a felony conviction. It will still appear on your record for law enforcement and court purposes, but for all other purposes, it's as if it does not exist. And a lot of individuals have availed themselves of this process to get a concealed pistol license and to restore the firearms ownership rights, even if they don't have a concealed pistol license. They would then be able to have the firearms rights restored such that they could open carry or just possess and own a firearm.
Okay, that's what so they can at least have, the right to protect themselves at home. Gotcha.
Yeah, you get that felony conviction. I mean, and I really hate to, some of the cases I really hear about it. I might get an individual who's, in his 40s or in his 50s. He went through a period in which he just was involved in some activities, and this might have happened when he was a teenager or early 20s. He got a couple of felonies. Can't get it expunged, but for, some of these people, they've lived, a decent life since they got through that stage, and it's really sad to hear them talk where, they say, hey, that's been like 20 years ago. That was 30 years ago, but they got those 2 convictions, and they can never get an expungement, and they can never get their firearms rights restored. And it's like the real travesty of this whole thing is I don't think folks realize that when they get that felony or a couple of felonies, what, the implications are for them down the road, should they ever get their life together.
Okay. Now, how long does it approximately take for that process? Once you realize you want to get the record expunged and you want to apply for that license, how long of a process does that usually take?
I can't really say. I'm not going to say obviously, but I've never gone through the process myself. But I don't know. It's not something. One thing too, I want to make sure we understand is that it's not a guarantee. It's not a slam dunk. Really, you're petitioning the court and asking them, would they consider the totality of the circumstances? How long ago it was. What type of life you've lived since then, are you capable of putting forth a good case that, now you're somebody that can be trusted, without, a felony conviction to readily identify you, it's not a slam dunk. You're really asking for permission. It's up to the judge.
Okay. Hey, I got a question here on my chat board from somebody, CP Antagonist. He's down in Texas. He said, great show. Thanks, Rick, for doing what you're doing. He said that he said in Texas, we see pistol and rifle ranges that were isolated now under fire from new home development. Do you face the same thing here in Michigan? Are new ranges accepted?
I'm not aware of any, but, that's not to say that it is. But I'm personally not aware of any encroachments on, fire gun ranges in terms of zoning issues or development issues. I really can't speak on that.
Yeah, and I can speak on the fact that we're not having too much new home development anyway that would be encroaching on any of these. As a realtor, I can tell you,
homes on the market we need to get rid of.
Yep, that it probably would not be interfering with any new home development. So, CP Antagonist.
There's something I want to talk about that I want to make sure I cover it before we leave. We actually had our open carry event this past Monday on the 18th. One thing that I did experience was that so I had some people come to the event and who wanted to ask me a very direct question. They really wanted to know, did the city of Detroit, do the law enforcement personnel, that is, does the Detroit Police Department, do they know if open carry is legal? Or are they just pulling our legs when they talk to us, when they stop us, and they want to treat us like criminals because we're bearing a firearm? Are these guys trampling over our right to bear a firearm, our seizing our firearms, unlawfully taking our property, even on a temporary basis, disrespecting us? These are some of the things I'm hearing from people, from the streets, people saying, I'm starting to have issues with the police. I'm starting to fear the police as much as I fear the bad guys. Does the Detroit Police Department know that open carry is legal? Do they know that? And a lot of people say, well, you know what? They can't know that because I've educated a few police officers on the subject. And some people might say, well, hey, this one police officer, he said if he ever saw a person open carrying on the street, he would do X, Y, and Z. Does the Detroit police officers, do they know this? Okay. And I took that to heart. I went to the Board of Police Commissioners meeting today, and the question I asked directly, and it was answered by Assistant Chief Chester Logan. Okay. I asked very directly, I said, do all of your police officers on the Detroit Police Force, do all of them know that open carry is legal? And do you have procedures or protocols in place how to handle a law enforcement officer visibly armed citizen encounter? What is your answer to those two questions? This is what he told me. He told me, quote, the short answer is yes to both questions. So, yes, he's saying that every law enforcement, every police officer on the Detroit Police Department knows that open carry is legal. And you know what? That struck me as a very significant fact. Okay. A very significant statement, shall I say. I'm going to couch it as a statement. I'm going to characterize it as a statement. I'm going to say it's a very important statement because we know, at least it is on the record as of today by the Assistant Chief, Chester Logan, that he has stated on the record that every Detroit police officer knows that open carry of a handgun is legal in the state of Michigan. Okay. So if I hear of any individual that claims that his rights were trampled upon and that he was unlawfully treated, unlawfully detained, unlawfully arrested, that type of thing, it doesn't seem a far stretch, at least in my mind, that officer, because the assistant chief said he knows or she knows that open carry is legal, that officer knew that it was legal, and that officer voluntarily chose to violate that citizen's rights. That's how I'm going to interpret that. And I don't think that that's a far stretch. And if that is so, it stands to reason that police officer's civil immunity would be taken away, and that law enforcement officer, that Detroit police officer, can be held civilly liable for that civil rights violation. Wow. And like you said, what examples are you seeing with going on? Are people getting detained, being harassed? People are getting detained. I've heard of people they treating them like they're I don't want to use that term, but unlawfully detained. As a matter of fact, at the actual open carry event, I was actually talking with a young lady. She walked in wearing twin pistols on her shoulder harness. She had two guns on her arms. And she said that that's exactly how she was walking one day in the city of Detroit. She was accosted by police officers. She said she was arrested. They got to court, and she said that she was trying to hide them when the police arrived on the scene, so she was allegedly committing a felony by trying to hide the firearms, trying to conceal the firearm without license as a felon. Okay. Well, if I believe her, she said that She has a concealed pistol license, so obvious the law enforcement officers, their statements didn't make any sense.
Right.
And so she's actively looking to explore a remedy in the court system.
Okay.
And if we have, according to the assistant chief, if every police officer in the city of Detroit knows that open carry is legal, and by implication, these police officers are wantonly and willfully violating people's rights out here, then you know what? One way to make them do right when they know right is to start suing.
Oh yeah, I can see why they. I can see why they stay mad at you.
So if they know better, why aren't they doing better? And you know what? Individuals are investigating, forcing them to do better, because when they get tired of paying out these lawsuits they're going to lose, maybe they'll do better because according to the assistant chief, they know better.
Wow. Yeah.
And if there is somebody out there in the sound of my voice that is experiencing these difficulties with law enforcement officers violating their rights, I got some attorneys I want to refer to you so that we can get some redress in the courts. Because if they know better and they're not doing better, we're going to force them to do better.
Excellent. Are these people working
that's
with?
part of the activism that we were talking about earlier.
Right. Yeah, and like you said, the police can't be everywhere to protect you. So I mean, we have the right to protect ourselves, and it would seem that police will respect law-abiding citizens who are exercising those rights.
Well, well, like I said, I asked the question and he answered it. And the other question I asked was, are there any procedures for handling these encounters? And he said yes. And then another gentleman came up later and asked, and he was relating a personal encounter about what happened to him, about being unlawfully detained and searched and relieved of his gun and basically treated harshly. You know, it was a totally negative experience. And he wanted to know, how do you handle, what is the departmental protocol for handling such a thing? And you know what? I'm very familiar with the Michigan State Police legal update, particularly issue number 86. And I actually brought a couple of copies of that document with me. And
okay,
you know what? It appears to me that the assistant chief was directly reading from the legal update.
Okay.
So I don't know how to interpret that. Did they adopt this one passage from this document that was created by the Michigan State Police and incorporate it into their procedures? Or, you know what, you could take the other train of thought and say, well, you know what, maybe they don't officially have a procedure, but they're just going to quote from this document. Well, a FOIA request, submitted to the Detroit Police Department will resolve that, because if they actually have that documentation, well, you know what, we'll actually receive it and see when it was enacted and when it was adopted. So that's one way to figure that out.
Wow. And is it your experience that actually that people are being taking their guns away from them and they have done nothing wrong?
These are the allegations that I'm hearing. And here's the thing: if this is in fact the case, I have a couple of attorneys. We will do the activism thing in the courts. And some of these police officers, if these allegations are true, they will be held personally liable. And some people might lose some houses. If you might have to lose a house in your car, you know what? Maybe you'll learn a lesson. Maybe we can send a lesson that way.
Wow. Well, I got to thank you for sticking up for people's rights out here, because it's like you said, it's people that believe in gun rights and even those that don't. You're sticking up for everybody's rights when it comes to that.
Absolutely. You don't even have to be pro-gun, and I'm still fighting for your right. This is your constitutional right. It's constitutionally recognized right, inalienable, God-given right. And whether you like guns, you anti-gun, I'm still going to fight for your right to have one in case you change your mind, or heaven forbid, you know what, another generation comes along and your children or your grandchildren want to have guns. I'm fighting for their right to have a gun.
Excellent. I think we got another caller. Let me see if he's still on the air. He's been on the switchboard for a minute. Hold on. Caller, you're on the air. I think we lost him. All right, sorry about that, Rick. So, Can you, for all the listeners that are listening in, can you give people the website address where they can find out more about you and your Twitter address? Because you're all over the place.
Oh yeah, I mean, you want me to inundate them with everything, or
give them everything? Because I mean, you're all over the place.
I'm going to give them everything. Let's do my official website. My official website is DetroitCCW.com. That's my branded site, DetroitCCW.com. My blog that I have has its own domain name. My blog is called LegallyArmedInDetroit.com. That's LegallyArmedInDetroit.com. My Twitter handle is DetroitCCW, all one word ran together. My Facebook ID is DetroitCCW. My YouTube account ID is DetroitCCW. Well, see, what else do I have? Twitter, we talk about Facebook, YouTube. You know what? I even have a MySpace account out there for folks that haven't migrated yet over to Facebook. My ID over on MySpace is Detroit CCW. See how easy that is to remember?
Very easy to remember. Tell me something about your classes. How diverse are the classes? How much approximately are men, women, young people, old people? What is a typical class like for you, Rick?
Typical, it's usually a hodgepodge from class to class. Every class has its unique composition and its unique diversity, but I'll say my last class because it's really fresh in my mind. I taught this class just this past Saturday. I had 15 total students. That's what I capped my enrollment at. I want to keep the classes nice and manageable. I had 12 women and I had 3 men. In terms of age, I had a few young people, maybe 5 or 6 or so, like in their mid-20s to late 20s, and then I think just about everyone else was like 30 and up. So we're talking about people who are pretty much either in the stage of accumulating stuff, in that accumulation stage where you're accumulating things and like homes and property, not so much the real young folk, but people in that accumulation stage. And I get a few seniors from time to time. This particular class, I actually had a lot of women in the class. And that's a unique thing when that happens, because usually in a gun safety class, sometimes women, are in the minority, but in this case, they were actually the majority.
Okay, all right. That's an interesting fact right there. We got 12 more women out there that are now able to protect themselves.
well, they've at least passed the class, the educational part, the shooting part. All they got to do now is submit their application to their respective county clerk's office, pay the fee, get fingerprinted, take the picture, and depending on what county they live in will determine how fast they get it back in the mail. Some counties, like Macomb, you got to actually go before the board and answer like about 5 or 6 questions. They're fairly innocuous. You just answer the questions and look them in the eye, and they'll give it to you on the spot.
Okay. Now, I just got another message from CP Antagonist down there in Texas. He just wanted to let us know that the citizens of Michigan need to be reminded that they have this right and to don't waste it. People assume Texas is the land of guns, but open carry is not a right in Texas. So use your rights, Michigan.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I had a cop that was so bold today to suggest to me that open carry wasn't going to be around for a while. Well, as long as there are people like me, and we only have to be in the majority, Wayne, people like me and you, that small minority, that small agitated group of individuals that fight every day to keep all of our rights, whether it's the Second Amendment or the First Amendment. Those of us who believe in that concept of freedom, they fight every day so that everyone else can have and enjoy those rights.
Okay, yep. Now, that's a good thing we have people like yourself keeping that battle on, because I'm sure that we have people out here that are fighting to try to end our gun rights here in Michigan. It's
a constant incessant battle, man, and we fight this war one battle at a time.
Okay.
In some cases, it's one election at a time.
All right, people, if you're listening out here, if you have any more questions for Rick, give us a call, 347-996-3175. Again, that calling number is 347-996-3175. Now, Rick, I guess another question is: do you usually conduct these classes in a classroom setting, a hotel, or a hotel conference room, or is it at some a gun school?
Actually, I teach it at a hotel. I rent out a conference ballroom and I lay it out in classroom style, and we sit down and we're nice and comfortable. I've seen classes, whether it's at a gun range or some other establishment, it's like a fishbowl. Not only do they not have tables, they actually have these like regular chairs and they have nothing to write on and they're all on top of each other. I've seen classes with as many as 50, 60 people in it.
Wow.
The one thing that I really think, is like, wow, are you really stifling a lot of questions that folks might have?
Right.
So I thought I would take a different tact. I would rather have a smaller facility, have top-rate instruction, actually contract out with a criminal defense attorney, best in the business. Give a shout-out to my man Terry Johnson, and charge a little more.
Okay.
Charge a little more and give the students more value than they're providing me in terms of paying a little more for the tuition.
Okay. All right. And I guess this is some questions that people want to listen to. Your favorite handguns.
Favorite? Oh, man. I mean, there's a lot of them that are out there. Things, guns that, I wouldn't, not carry. But just in general, here's just some things to look for.
Okay.
You're talking about a handgun for personal protection, so your minimum caliber at least has to be a 9mm handgun. At least 9mm in caliber. And for those who are not familiar with the term caliber, we're talking about roughly equivalent to the diameter of the barrel. That is the actual tube that the fired projectile, the fired bullet will actually travel through before it exits at the end of that barrel, which is called the muzzle. At least 9mm in caliber. It fits your hand like a glove. You can reach all the controls with your one hand. Your trigger finger length is good such that the middle fleshy part of that first segment can actually make good contact with the trigger. It's a handgun that you feel reasonably comfortable with and that you can shoot reliably and that is made from a good quality manufacturer. And typically here, speaking to your audience nationally here in the Midwest, I'm talking about the $500 price range. Obviously, in other areas of the country, it might be a little more or a little less. But I'm talking about handgun manufacturers such as Smith & Wesson, Glock, Beretta, Springfield XD. You want to go a little higher up, you want to do Colt or Kimber or H&K. These are some pretty good quality guns. And I might be missing a few, but you can't go wrong with those. Okay,
all right. And have you ever been to any of the more exotic ranges, like out in Las Vegas, where they, you get to use some more of the heavy artillery?
I've read about those things, and the last time I've been to Las Vegas, I wasn't even a gun owner, So I tell you what, the next time I make it to Vegas, I will definitely do that.
All right, I'm leaving the phone lines open here for another minute or two. If you got any questions for Rick Ector, give us a call, 347-996-3175. Again, the number is 347-996-3175, or ask a question here on the chat room. And, Rick, I want to thank you again for coming on the show because, again, you've been one of our most popular guests that we've had on here. People like to talk about guns and gun rights, and you've been a favorite here on the show.
Well, man, that's what I am. I'm a teacher. I'm an educator, and I empower people. I empower you with knowledge. I empower you with the gift of personal protection. And I stress that if you're going to be a gun owner, it behooves you. And I'll even say I plead with you to be responsible, to be lawful. Learn the law. Be responsible with your firearms. And, here's the thing that I want to stress. Not only do you represent just yourself as a handgun owner, I mean, you also represent your community or your particular city or that city's reputation with what gun owners are doing in that city. And more importantly, as a community, you're representing all other gun owners. If you're just a gun owner, or I shouldn't say just a gun owner, but if you're a gun owner and or if you're a person that open carries or a person that concealed carry, really we're all in the same boat. We're all gun owners. And I just want to, throw it out to the community, the gun community. Let's not keep, focusing on our differences. Let's come together as a community, because there's a group of folks that are totally united in disarming us, and we really need to hang together to protect our rights.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rick, for coming on the show. And you're always welcome back to come on anytime. So keep the good fight. You think you're going out to Dearborn tomorrow?
You know what? I heard a few people are going. I don't know. If I go, it might be that traffic, accident thing where you're on the freeway and there's an accident, and
down.
everything is telling you not to look, but there's that morbid thing that you're going to look anywhere. I think I'm just going to stay away from that circus out there. I'm going to stay away.
I hear you. Well, thanks so much again for coming on the show. I look forward to following you on some more of these great events you're doing. And next time you have one, make sure you come on the show so we can talk about it and get people to come on out there.
Hey, thank you. Thank you first, foremost for inviting me to be back on the show. I'm a little remiss that, I didn't invite to come back earlier, that I didn't ask to come back earlier. But, hey, I'm here now. And I promise if I got something going, man, I'll hit you up and we'll get me back on.
And I think, like I was telling you before, I think I have you come on a little more often just to keep people updated and educated and remind people of the responsibilities of being a good gun owner. So, I appreciate you for coming on the show.
Man, once again, Wayne, thank you very much and have a great night.
All right, have a blessed night, brother. And that was Rick Ector, gun activist and instructor, giving people some great knowledge tonight. As an active gun owner myself, I really encourage people to take advantage of your rights and to understand the laws and to educate yourself so that you're not putting yourself in a position to be taken advantage of or having your rights violated. And again, I hope people listen to this show more than once, because it was some very good information that was being put out about preserving your gun, preserving your rights to protect yourself, knowing what you need to do to take the steps to be legally licensed, whether it's an open carry license or a concealed license. It's important to know all the steps and take those steps to protect yourself. So I want to thank Rick again for coming on the show. I want to thank my caller for calling in. Thank CP Antagonist on the live board for his questions. Shouts out to you out there in Texas. If you have any other questions, give me a call, 347-996-3175. We'll be back on the air next Tuesday at 9 p.m. We're going to start going back to the to the late evening format. I was trying to do it in the mornings, but it just seems that we're getting a better reaction here in the evening. So we're going to try to go back to going in the evenings. I want to thank everyone that's been listening from the very beginning, that's been supportive of the show. I appreciate you for taking the time to listen, to give feedback. Again, the call-in number is 347-996-3175. We also, I want you to, if you get a chance, go to the website, assertiveiscool.com, and you can see all the archived interviews, some of the recent blogs. I had a show earlier this week from the president of the Frederick Douglass Foundation of Michigan, Stacy Swimp. He was on my last show, so we've had some good shows this week with some good people that are trying to make a difference in the communities that they live in and serve. So, again, thanks to Stacy Swimp for coming on earlier this week. Thank you again for Rick Ector coming on. I want to thank everyone for listening into the Wayne Bradley Show. I want you to keep your ears peeled for my Michigan show that we're bringing back. We're going to call it the Michigan Voice. And I'll be bringing that back soon. I hope to have a lot of my local people to come on the show so we can really start talking the debates here in Michigan. Brandon Jessup, I'm looking forward to bringing him on. That's my guy. We have a lot of different opinions. We want the same results. Sometimes there's different routes to get there, so I'm looking forward to doing a show with him. And again, we're going to bring on all our leaders and try to ask them the questions, make them accountable. And again, I thank everyone that's listened up to this point. All been supportive of my show, and we're going to continue to bring the important topics of the day, stir open-minded debates. I encourage people that disagree to call in and debate just as much as the people that agree, because we can do it civilly and disagree, but it's always a good thing to have the open debate. So Again, thank you for listening in and following the show. I'm about to go off the air here in about another 20 seconds. So, again, if you get a chance, go to conservativeiscool.com. Check out the website. We also have a donate section on there if you're interested in helping out with the show. Even $5, anything like that, it helps to continue to invest in the show and marketing and things of that nature. So, thanks again for everyone that's listened, and God bless you. Good night.